Welcome back to Fear Spiral. You know the rules. Hit that like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time the darkness caught you here. It keeps the stories alive and keeps you close to the shadows. Now, shall we begin? It was the summer of 2021 when I decided to take a solo camping trip into the Allegheny National Forest in Pennsylvania. And at the time I thought it would be nothing more than a much-needed retreat from the noise of my life. A chance to breathe, reset, and lose myself in the wilderness for a few days. But what happened to me out there changed the way I look at forests forever. And it left me with scars that no one can see, the kind that live in the back of your mind and crawl into your dreams, the kind that make you question every sound in the night, every shadow just beyond the firelight, every stranger you pass on a trail. And even though I'm telling this story now, there are still parts of it that feel unreal, like I stepped into some hidden world within those endless pines. A world where human rules don't apply and where something or someone was watching me. My name is Chris, I'm 34 years old, and I grew up outdoors hiking and fishing with my dad, spending summers camping by lakes, winters snowshoeing in the Adirondacks, and later as an adult I tested myself in harsher places. The Sierra Nevada, the Rockies, even desert treks in Arizona. And I always prided myself on being prepared, rational and calm in the face of challenges, because when you've spent enough time in the wild, you learn that fear doesn't help. Planning does, but nothing in all those years prepared me for the silence I found in Allegheny. I had been working insane hours as an electrician in Pittsburgh, 60 hours a week, weekends on call, and when my relationship fell apart that spring, I felt like I was losing myself, like I was suffocating. So I did what I always do when life caves in. I went back to the woods, because that's where I've always been able to think clearly. I mapped a trip that would take me 25 miles into the forest, following trails for the first day, and then breaking off to reach a stream I'd seen on an old topo map, where I planned to set up a base camp for 3 nights. And from there I would explore ridges, fish, and let the noise of my life fade into the trees. I packed light but thorough. Tent, sleeping bag, food for 4 days, water filter, compass, knife, journal, and my old DSLR because I like photographing landscapes. And I left my phone in the car because I didn't want it buzzing with texts from people I didn't want to hear from anymore. The first day was perfect. Clear skies, the smell of pine heavy in the air, a light breeze whispering through the trees, and the kind of deep green canopy that filters sunlight into a golden glow. And when I found a small clearing just before dusk, I set up my tent, built a fire, cooked rice and beans, and sat listening to crickets, owls, and the occasional splash of something in the distance. And I felt that old peace settle in my chest, the sense that I was right where I belonged. The second day I hiked deeper, tracing ridges, following deer trails, taking photos of mossy rocks and twisted roots that looked like something out of a fantasy novel. And by late afternoon I made it back to my camp, tired but happy. And that's when I noticed it. The forest had gone still, unnaturally still, the way it sometimes does before a storm. But the sky was clear, not a cloud in sight, and the silence pressed against my ears until I could hear my own breathing. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was nothing, that sometimes animals just quiet down all at once, but the unease stayed with me as I cooked dinner, and later when I lay in my tent writing in my journal. It was so quiet that the scratch of my pen on paper sounded too loud, like I was disturbing something. I must have drifted off around midnight. But at 2 a.m, I woke up with my heart pounding, no idea why at first, and then I heard it, footsteps outside my tent. Slow, heavy, deliberate, not the scamper of a raccoon or the snap of a deer's hooves, but the weight of something upright, moving with intent, circling. My hand went automatically to the knife I kept beside my sleeping bag, and I held my breath, straining to listen. And the steps crunched pine needles in a slow arc around me, pausing, moving again, pausing. I told myself it had to be an animal, maybe a bear, though the steps didn't sound like that, but I clung to the thought because the alternative, that it was a person, was worse, much worse, because no one should have been out there, miles off any trail in the dead of night, circling a stranger's tent. I lay frozen, every muscle tense, eyes wide though I couldn't see anything through the nylon, only shadows and the faintest shapes when the moonlight shifted. At one point the steps stopped so close I could almost feel the presence outside. And then very faintly I saw the blur of a shadow tall and upright, and that was when my stomach turned to ice, because I knew it was no animal, it was a man, I gripped my knife until my knuckles ached, my mind racing through options. Should I shout? Should I lunge out of the tent? Should I stay still and wait? My instincts screamed to stay silent, so I did, lying there as the footsteps resumed, slow, steady, circling, and then after what felt like an eternity, they stopped and the silence returned deeper than before. I didn't sleep again. I stayed awake until dawn, every rustle making me flinch, my knife in my hand under the sleeping bag. When the sky finally lightened and I dared unzip the tent, what I saw made my blood run cold. Boot prints, large, heavy, circling my tent again and again, overlapping in loops like whoever it was had spent an hour just walking around me, sometimes stopping less than 2 feet from where my head had been. They weren't hiking boots like mine. They were old work boots with worn soles and a lopsided tread, and there was only one set, one person, out there alone, or maybe not alone, maybe the only one who came close while others watched from further back. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself maybe some local hunter had stumbled across me, but no hunter would circle a tent silently at 2 in the morning, not say a word, not make themselves known. I packed up my gear that morning with shaking hands, debating whether to cut the trip short, but part of me stubbornly refused, telling myself I wasn't going to let some creep scare me out of the woods, that I'd come here to find peace and I wasn't leaving after only one night. But the truth was I already felt hunted, like something in the forest had marked me. That day I tried to distract myself with long hikes, climbing ridges, photographing streams, but every time the wind shifted I thought I heard footsteps behind me, and every time the trees swayed I thought I saw movement in the corner of my eye. And when I returned to camp I scanned the ground for prints, finding none, though I knew he had been there. That night I built a bigger fire, stacked wood close, and kept my knife at my side as I lay in my tent, determined to stay awake. But exhaustion took me anyway, and once again I woke in the dark, my heart hammering, and once again I heard it, the slow steps circling closer this time, deliberate. I gripped my knife and sat up, and that's when I heard something worse than footsteps, a whistle low and tuneless drifting through the trees. It wasn't a song, just a drawn-out note, broken and strange, rising and falling like someone trying to mimic a bird but failing, and the sound moved with the steps, circling my camp, pausing, circling again, and I realized with sick certainty that whoever it was wanted me to know they were there, wanted me to hear them. I clenched my teeth, every instinct screaming to run, but where? Into the black woods where he knew every tree and I would stumble blind? So I stayed, shaking, listening to that awful whistle fade into silence. And again, when dawn came, I found the prints, fresh in the damp earth, circling, stopping by the fire pit, even standing just outside my tent door. He had been inches away from me. I lasted one more night. That third day I was a wreck, too tired to focus, jumping at every sound, scanning the trees constantly. I thought about hiking out, but I was deep in and the fastest way back was still a day's hike, so I decided I'd leave at first light. I didn't even try to sleep that night, I just sat by the fire, feeding it constantly, knife across my lap, eyes fixed on the dark beyond the glow. And sometime after midnight I saw him. Just a shape at first between the trees, too still to be an animal, too tall. And when my fire crackled brighter, I caught the glint of eyes, pale and reflective, watching me. My throat went dry and I shouted, "I see you!" My voice sounded weak in the vast silence, and the figure didn't move, didn't run. Just stood there watching, and then slowly it stepped back into the shadows and vanished. I stayed awake until dawn, and when the light came, I packed everything in minutes and hiked out, not stopping, not eating, just pushing until my legs burned, and even then I felt eyes on me the whole way. When I finally reached my car and locked the doors, I sat shaking, unable to start the engine, because I knew I had been stalked for 3 nights by someone who lived out there, someone who chose me for reasons I'll never understand, and I escaped only because I left. To this day, I don't know who he was, what he wanted, or if he still roams those pines, waiting for the next person foolish enough to camp alone. But sometimes at night when the world goes quiet, I swear I still hear that broken whistle, low and tuneless, circling in the dark. The Hollow Mine. 3 years ago, I went into the hills of West Virginia looking for forgotten places to photograph, old structures left behind by time, the kind of places that tell their own story through rust, rot, and silence. And what I found instead was something that still wakes me up at night, something that made me abandon my work and pack away my camera for months. Because once you hear your own name whispered in the dark, you realize some places are forgotten for a reason, and some places want to stay that way. And my only mistake was not listening to the warnings. My name is Derek, I'm a photographer, and I've always been drawn to ruins. Old factories, churches no one prays in anymore. Houses that crumble into themselves, because they hold a kind of truth that polished modern buildings never can. A record of lives that passed through, of struggles and failures. And when I heard about abandoned coal mines deep in the hills, shafts that went so far underground no one had mapped them in decades, I knew I had to see for myself. People warned me, of course. Every local I talked to had the same look in their eyes when I mentioned the mines they called the Hollow. Some shook their heads and told me people went missing there, that the ground itself swallowed men, that voices carried from tunnels that had been sealed for 100 years. But I told myself it was folklore. The same way every old town builds ghost stories around its tragedies. Because coal country has seen plenty of tragedies, and if you believed every whispered warning, you'd never explore anywhere. I drove into the hills on a hot summer morning, the air heavy with humidity, the road twisting tighter the deeper I went, until I found what I was looking for, a sagging chain-link fence half swallowed by vines, a rusted sign that once read mine property keep out, and a dirt track leading into trees. My heart kicked up the way it always does before I explore a new place, the mix of fear and excitement, because you never know what you'll find, and I grabbed my pack, my camera, my flashlight, and ducked past the fence. The entrance was a yawning black mouth in the hillside, ringed with rotting timbers that had been meant to shore it up decades ago, but now sagged like old bones, and the air that drifted out was cool and damp, carrying the smell of stone and rust, and beneath it something faintly metallic like blood on a coin. I set up my tripod, snapped a few shots of the entrance, then switched to my flashlight and stepped inside, and the moment I did, the world shifted. The sounds of birds and cicadas outside vanished, muffled by the weight of earth, and all that remained was the drip of water somewhere in the dark and the crunch of my boots on gravel. I kept moving, the beam of my light cutting tunnels that branched off into blackness, beams that had collapsed decades ago, leaving jagged gaps, old rusted rails where carts once ran deeper into the earth. The deeper I went, the more I felt it. Pressure, like the air itself, grew heavier with each step, like the earth wanted me out. After about 20 minutes, I reached a massive chamber where the ceiling arched high above, beams collapsing in a spiderweb of broken wood, and I set up my tripod to take a long exposure shot. The camera clicked, the shutter held open, but then froze. I frowned, checked the battery, full charge. Tried again, nothing. My DSLR had never done that before. As I fiddled with it, I heard it. The sound of rocks shifting in the tunnel behind me, slow, deliberate, like footsteps echoing on gravel. I froze, flashlight beam trembling across walls of black coal. Hello? My voice came back to me distorted, stretched by the tunnel into something that didn't sound like me, and there was no answer. Only silence, until the rocks shifted again. Closer this time. My heart hammered, and I told myself maybe an animal had wandered in. Maybe another explorer, though what kind of person lurks silent in a mine? I shouted again, but this time the echo returned, overlapped with something else. Something faint but real. A whisper. I couldn't make out the words, only the shape of sound curling back from the darkness. I told myself I was imagining it, nerves twisting the echo, but then it came again, clearer this time, and my stomach dropped because it was my name. My own name, whispered from deep in the shaft in a voice that wasn't mine and wasn't anyone I knew. Derek. Just that, soft, drawn out, but enough to send ice through my veins. I swung the flashlight down the tunnel, the beam cutting into the black, but there was nothing there. Only walls slick with moisture and the endless dark swallowing the light. My breath came fast, fogging in the cold air, and I backed toward the chamber, fumbling to grab my tripod. My camera, anything to anchor me, and as I did, the whisper came again, louder now, echoing closer. Derek. I bolted, tripod clattering to the ground, camera swinging around my neck as I sprinted toward the entrance. Light bouncing wildly, shadows leaping on the walls like figures chasing me. The tunnels twisted, forked, and for one sickening moment I wasn't sure I remembered the way. Panic flooding in, and then I saw faint daylight ahead, a gray glow like salvation. I ran harder, lungs burning, and just as I reached the threshold, just as the light hit my face, I felt it. Breath. Cold and damp on the back of my neck, close enough that every hair on my body stood on end, and I stumbled out into the open, gasping. The moment I crossed that line, the whispering stopped. Not faded, stopped like a switch thrown, and the forest outside roared back with sound. Birds, insects, life. I collapsed on the ground, shaking, clutching my camera like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. I didn't go back. I couldn't. I left the tripod in there, left a part of myself in there too, I think. And the worst part? Later, when I finally worked up the courage to check the photos on my camera, most were corrupted, static, and black smears. But one came through clear. The chamber, lit by my flash, and in the far corner, where the shadows should have been empty, was a figure pale, thin, eyes too bright even in the darkness, staring directly at me. The vanishing road. I've driven a lot of back roads in my life. Long stretches of empty highway, where the forest presses close and the radio fades into static. But nothing compares to what happened the night I found myself on a road that, according to every map I checked later, doesn't exist. A road that seemed to open just for me and nearly kept me forever. And telling it now feels like reopening a wound I've tried to forget. Because part of me knows I never really left it behind. My name is Sarah. I was 26 at the time, coming back from visiting my sister in a small town in Kentucky, and I'd left later than I should have. The kind of late where dusk melts into full dark before you even realize it. But I thought I'd be fine. 3 hours of driving, a full tank of gas, podcasts lined up to keep me awake. Nothing out of the ordinary. The first hour was uneventful, just winding state highways and the occasional farmhouse light in the distance. But around 10 o'clock my GPS lost signal, the map freezing mid-scroll, and I suddenly realized how alone I was. No other cars passed me, no towns ahead, just endless curves through the forest. That's when I saw the turnoff. It wasn't on my GPS, wasn't marked by any sign, just a narrow paved road splitting from the highway, angling deeper into the trees. I should have ignored it, should have stayed straight. But something about the road drew me, like the way its pavement looked newer, smoother than the cracked highway I was on, almost like it was promising a shortcut. And before I could second-guess myself, I flicked on my blinker and turned. Immediately, the world changed. My headlights stretched down a road so perfectly black it looked wet. The paint lines bright, freshly marked, yet no reflectors, no mile markers, no signs. The forest pressed tighter, trees arching overhead, their branches clawing against the sky so that it felt like driving through a tunnel. My radio cut to static, and when I tried my phone again, the screen stayed frozen. The little blue dot unmoving no matter how far I drove. Still, I told myself maybe this was some forgotten county road. Maybe it would connect back to the highway sooner than I thought, and I kept going. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The road never curved, never intersected, just stretched straight into the blackness, and the deeper I went, the stranger it became. My headlights should have caught glimpses of houses, driveways, anything, but there was nothing but trees, endless and unbroken, and then I started to notice the fog. At first it was faint, wisps rising from the asphalt, but it thickened fast, curling in sheets across the road until my brights only lit a wall of white. I slowed, heart thudding, gripping the wheel tight because driving blind in fog is how accidents happen. But the road gave me no choice, no shoulder to pull off on, no turnouts, just forward. That's when I saw the first sign. A wooden board nailed crooked to a post, letters carved into it by hand, illuminated for just a second in my headlights. Keep going. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a highway sign, wasn't anything official, just rough wood with jagged letters, and it was the worst possible command to read in that moment. Still, what else could I do? I kept going. The fog swallowed the sign behind me, and soon another emerged, this one reading, "Do not stop." My pulse spiked because this wasn't coincidence anymore. Someone had put those there. Someone expected travelers to come this way, and I was driving straight into whatever they wanted me to. I tried to turn around, but when I slowed and checked my mirrors, my blood ran cold. There was nothing behind me. No headlights, no stretch of road fading into distance. Just black, like the world itself had been erased the moment I passed. Panic clawed at me, and I pressed the gas, heart hammering, whispering to myself that it had to come out somewhere, it had to. That's when I saw her. A figure on the side of the road, half hidden by fog, standing still as my car approached. My lights caught her face, and I nearly screamed. An old woman. Skin gray and sagging, eyes black pits that seemed to drink the light, her mouth opening too wide as I passed, as if to scream, but no sound came. only the static of my dead radio spiking loud enough to rattle the speakers. I slammed the accelerator, tears stinging my eyes, and when I glanced in the mirror, she was gone, not a trace, like she'd been part of the fog itself. My hands shook on the wheel, every instinct screaming to get off this road, but there was nowhere to go, only forward, and soon another sign loomed out of the mist. Don't listen. I didn't understand, not until the voices started. At first they were faint, like my windows were cracked and people were talking just outside. Too soft to make out, but they grew louder with every mile, whispers overlapping. Dozens of voices crowding into the car, some calling my name, some begging me to stop, others laughing low and cruel. I covered my ears, but it didn't matter. They were inside my head, filling it until I thought I'd lose my mind. I screamed at them to shut up, and for 1 second they did. And in that silence I heard something worse. Something that will never leave me. My sister's voice, clear and broken, sobbing my name. Sarah, help me. I nearly slammed the brakes right there, nearly listened, but the memory of that sign, don't listen, was the only thing that kept my foot on the gas. I sobbed as I drove, begging whatever force had trapped me to let me out, promising anything if I could just see the real world again. Time dissolved. I don't know if I drove for an hour or a night or forever. The fog grew so thick I couldn't see my hood, only the glowing paint lines guiding me forward until suddenly, as if a curtain lifted, it was gone. The fog, the voices, the endless trees gone. I blinked against sudden darkness and realized I was back on the main highway, the same cracked asphalt I'd started on, my GPS chirping back to life like nothing had happened. My hands left sweat on the wheel. My legs shook so badly I had to pull over and sob on the side of the road until dawn. The strangest part? When I checked my odometer, I'd only traveled 4 miles. 4 miles that took me somewhere no map has ever shown. Somewhere I'll never risk going again. And sometimes, late at night when the roads are empty, I swear I see that same turnoff in my headlights, waiting, calling, daring me to take it again.